Okay, so Lachlan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. So nice to be joined by a Brit. I don't often get the honor of that, so it's fantastic. Very excited.
Ah, cool. Well, I'm glad to offer something different for you. I'm sure most people will have an idea of who you are, but just give us a brief intro of who you are and what it is you do now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think most people would know me in my public persona as one of the hosts of the Mind Muscle Project, one of Australia's top fitness podcasts. It's been going for 5 years, and I guess the main job that I do every day, which isn't on the internet as much, is run my 3 facilities. So they were CrossFit affiliates, and now they're just, I guess, boutique functional fitness gyms, if you'd like. So that takes up most of my time. I'm basically head of marketing, so I control all the content strategy, the messaging, all that stuff there. I'm across all the different platforms and kind of run like an in-house marketing team for the gyms and help out with the leadership and the operation for the coaches as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so quite hands off then in terms of the day-to-day, like running of classes and more operational side of things in the business.
Yes. Yep.
How,
Absolutely.
how long ago did you start the gyms?
So the gyms turned 6, or the oldest gym turned 6 this year in January. No, sorry, turned 6 Jan. And we have been running 3 locations for 4 years. I want to say we, Raf and my business partner, also the co-host of the podcast as well. So yeah, we opened up the second location about a year and a half after our first location, and then the third location about a year after the second location. So it's been a wild journey. I was just telling you before that we've just bought out another business partner. So it actually started with 5. If anyone knows anything about business, 5's not a good number to try and pull 5 salaries from one gym. So 5 has become 2. So 2 is the remaining kind of lifeblood of the gym. And I think Raf and I, just due to the podcast and just how it played out, we could have never predicted this, that we just had the best dynamic. We just worked best with each other. And so I felt like this point was, inevitable.
Yeah. So you and Raf were business partners within the gym before you started the podcast. And so did you?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we started the podcast 6 months in to the gyms.
Right. Okay.
Maybe less. Yeah.
Well, because I've been a listener to the podcast for quite a while, and you guys have, as you said, a good dynamic. Did you guys know each other before that, or were you business partners who then struck up just a great relationship?
We got introduced by a mutual friend. So I had a training partner. So Rory, who was the business partner we recently just bought out, he introduced us. So Rory and I trained together for about a year. Raf and Rory went to school together. So they knew each other probably 5 years before I knew either of them. And yeah, so Rory convinced Raf to get into this CrossFit thing. Raf was very anti-CrossFit. He was very pro sort of rugby, strength and conditioning, very Joe DeFranco sort of training method, which at the end of the day, it's not too dissimilar. And so reluctantly tried CrossFit. Roy dragged him along to his first session, 2012, I think, started 2012. And that's when Raf and I met. It wasn't long after that discussions sort of started brewing between the three of us as, oh, what do you want to do when, you get out of university? And then it kind of, one thing led to another. We're like, hey, let's start a gym. It sounds like a great idea. Yeah, and let's bring across 2 more people and let's get 5 people to run one gym. So that's how that started.
Oh, great. I mean, you do what you have to, don't you, financially, to get it off the ground. And as you said, now you've grown it to a place where there's just the 2 of you, which is great. I think, and you got in at the right time, right? 2012, definitely the peak of the CrossFit industry and the growth of the gyms.
Yeah, so we didn't actually get in at 2012. We opened in 2014. So we actually, if you actually look at the exact month that we opened, and you line it up with the first dip in the Google search of CrossFit in Australia, we picked the month, the very first month that the trend line went down in the search for CrossFit in Australia. So I think it basically hit the saturation point right when we opened our gym.
Oh, right. So actually, if anything, the odds were against you, but you seem to have smashed against that and grown locations while other people have been closing them down.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, actually. It's kind of a blessing in disguise because, initially we didn't get that build it and they will come that a lot of people got in 2010, 2011. And the gym we came from from the outside was very successful. You know, they had a lot of members, there was a lot of revenue. They did have 5 owners at one stage, but when things are just going really well and you don't understand why they're going well and you haven't struggled yet, and there's just people coming in, there's just money everywhere, like you just think you're killing it. You have no good solid foundation of business practices. You have no marketing, like you have no sales system. And so a lot of those gyms, I think, just did really well and opened extra locations, overhired, maybe bought equipment that they couldn't really afford, and just expecting that it would just keep going up and up and up. And when it kind of dipped and it crashed and they didn't have good solid business practices, as a result, you ended up seeing so many gyms close because they didn't know what to do. Whereas because we started and they weren't running in the door from day one, throwing money at us, we're like, okay, so we need to figure out marketing. Okay, how do we retain clients? What is a sales process look like? How do we get better staff? So we started, I think, how most businesses start, which is no one knows about you. No one's coming in. And that's not completely true. Obviously, there was still a lot of hype around CrossFit in 2014, but we definitely missed that huge influx that people would just be coming in just wanting to give you money. So I think, you know, in hindsight, 5 years, 6 years down the track, it did make us better business owners.
Yeah, because you, as you said, you had to force to look at it as a business and actually build operating procedures and marketing and actually do all the things that you need to do as a business.
Absolutely.
I think it's why did you stop at 3 locations, I guess, then? Because you kind of opened 3 in quick succession, and then so for the past 3 years or so haven't opened another one. You sort of thought that was enough bandwidth for you guys to deal with.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, you know, there's 3 business owners at the time with operating 3 locations. So, you know, on paper, it made sense. It's like, you'll stay here mostly, you'll stay here mostly, and you'll stay there mostly. So that's kind of how we ran it for a bit. If anyone that's opened multiple locations will know that going from 1 to 2 is a lot easier than going from 2 to 3. When you go from 2 to 3, what you realize right now is you're spread so thin, and all of a sudden you just have to do things a lot differently. You can't be in 3 places at once. You can kind of be in 2 places at once. You can spend a morning somewhere and then drive to the evening in the other place, but you just can't spread yourself across 3 locations. It's impossible. And I think that realization of how hard it was to run 3 just made us realize, okay, if we start killing it with 3, then we could go to 10. Because I think from going from 3 to 10 is easier than going from, say, 2 to 3. You learn a lot of lessons from 2 to 3. But it was in that kind of 2 to 3 point that we had to sit down and decide, okay, do we want to open more locations? What is that going to look like? We kind of understand now how difficult it is. Is this a path we want to go down? And with 3 heads at the table, three people pulling in different directions, we just decided, for now, let's just try and get the 3 as profitable as possible, and then we can decide if we want to open more locations. And this was right around the time, I don't know if you know many of them in your area, but F45, which started just down the road from us, like really started to take off, and they started to expand and explode very quickly. And we just thought, if you wanted to create a model that could actually have 100, 200, 1,000 locations, it just wasn't the model that we were running. You just can't fit enough people in it. It's hard to get real estate because you want to drop barbells, you want to make noise, you need better soundproofing. Whereas the F45 model was designed to scale. It was every single aspect of it was designed so that you could have 1,000 of them in like 2 or 3 years. And so because we didn't want to do that, that also contributed to the fact that we didn't really want that many locations.
Sure. Yeah, it's, as you said, it depends on what you're wanting out of the business and how much money you're wanting to make. And now, like I said, there's only 2 of you and you're running 3 locations. It's a case of, as you said, you can probably get by really well if you focus your attention on the podcast, and just enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think, because we had the podcast, it was obviously, it kind of really changed for us. I know Rory wasn't involved in the podcast. But for Raf and I, we felt like both of us were very ambitious. We wanted to have really big impact on the fitness industry. And we were getting that through the podcast. So we were kind of scratching that itch. So we thought, if we open more locations, we can't run the podcast anymore, or the podcast is not going to grow. But if we keep it how it is now, we can continue to grow the podcast. And then for both of us, that was very fulfilling. So I'm not sure if we would have stopped at 3 if we hadn't had the podcast.
Sure.
So I don't know, if we didn't have the podcast, we might have 10 gyms. We might have 20 gyms. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's turned out all right as it has, hasn't it?
I think it's turned out how it should have.
Yeah. And so when did you take you said now that like your gym's a Creature Fitness, right? So you took the CrossFit name off the front of the door. When was that decision, and what brought that on for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that decision I think was about 2.5 years ago now, maybe two. The decision for that was actually my decision. I saw that what CrossFit was doing was having a negative impact 8 out of 10 times in the new client sales conversations that we were having at the gym.
Right.
So people were coming in with preconceived ideas about what CrossFit is, firstly, but also how much it should cost. And so that wasn't allowing us to control the conversation. So if I wanted to come in and tell people what we do and what the results are like, I would have to, they would be contrasting that against what they saw on Netflix or what they saw on YouTube or what they saw on Instagram. And I was finding that was a very difficult conversation because they had probably consumed so much of that CrossFit Games content, expecting that's what we do at the gym. And therefore their expectations were misaligned. So even if I could help that person, they were coming in expecting to get muscle ups and do rope climbs and do snatches. And I'm trying to onboard them in personal training, teaching them, how to brace for a squat. They just weren't going to be happy. Even though it's maybe the best thing for them, their expectations were over here. And when I came in with something completely different, even though it was the best thing for them, they just weren't happy. And, the customer's always right. So what we decided was we need to control the narrative of what we do at the gym and how much it should cost. And I felt like the first step was to change our name. It would be hard to say we're not really a CrossFit gym if it was smacked out on the sign. So yeah, I made the decision to remove it. Roy and Raf gave me their blessing. They're like, all right, if you really think so. I pushed hard for it. And yeah, I think maybe 2-3 months after that, Jason Kleeper took CrossFit out of his name. Knockout CrossFit became NC Fit.
Yep.
And then a few other gyms did it. Some big name gyms. I think Brick CrossFit went to like Brick Fitness or something like that. Some other big name gyms. And then we started to say, okay, this is the right decision.
Yeah, you started the trend. You started the domino effect. Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. As you said, I think there's a big misalignment between CrossFit as a health program and the CrossFit Games. And I think the growth of CrossFit with the CrossFit Games, as you said, everything that then was on YouTube or Netflix was all focused around the 0.01% of the population that were the athletes versus how do we get people in just being healthier and moving more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that really happens in anything, right? Anyone, like in basketball, right? People want to play like LeBron James, but for some reason there's a disconnect in CrossFit where people are like, okay, in order to become Rich Froning, I must train like Rich Froning. But I think most people that watch basketball and watch LeBron James play don't necessarily think, oh, I should be training how LeBron James trains right now. He's doing all kinds of crazy agility drills. He's doing, 8-hour gym sessions. He's on the court, 7-8 hours a day at 4 a.m. Not many people really think that way. But because I think CrossFit's so new as a sport, there's no kind of established ways of doing things. As a result, you just had the whole general public going, oh yeah, he's really good, so I'm going to do that because I'm not too different from Rich Froning. But they didn't realize they were looking at like the 0.01%.
Yeah, they're like, oh well, Rich Froning trains 6 hours a day and does 20 workouts, so I'm just going to throw myself in. And then they wake up.
A career break. I can afford time to do that.
And they wake up with rhabdo and wonder what's happened to their lives. And so you took CrossFit out of the name, and then obviously that did well for the business because you were able to then set yourself apart. You're then saying, right, well, we're a boutique fitness gym and this is how we're different, because then you can advertise it as small group personal training without them having preconceived ideas of what they're expecting.
Yeah, that's right. But I wouldn't say, that it happened easily. I would say that only really in the last sort of year had we come see what we were expecting, at some point come to fruition. And that is just because there was so many of the old clientele that we needed at the gym to support the gym financially, that were holding on to the old ideas and old ways of doing things at the gym, which made our growth quite difficult because your culture is massive. It's everything at your gym. So if people are coming in and the culture is, oh, this is how we used to do it, this is the programming we liked, and you're trying to bring in this new idea, but that's 20% of the members, it's gonna be a slow change. So it just took time. It just took people time for the old members to leave and find other gyms that they do kind of the traditional CrossFit style training, and then for eventually the new clients to become the majority, the ones that are in for the new beliefs and the personal training and the onboarding and paying more money and doing more boutique sort of small group training.
Mm-hmm. And more just basic movement patterns that people want to do. So probably less of the Olympic lifts, less of the high skill gymnastics, and just more of the basic like squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and we want those people to aspire to those movements at some point, but we don't throw them to them on day one.
No. And I guess that's then it's a journey of them making it, isn't it, through their own progression, and they have their own kind of journeys through it, don't they? Rather than thinking from day one that's what they need to be doing.
Yeah, I think you said it exactly right. It's if you place value on it for them, then they will strive for it. Instead, it's much better for you to have it there, and then if they choose to make that a goal themselves, then I'm happy for that to help them get there. But I don't want to come in and be like, for you to be healthy and fit, like you should have 10 muscle ups. Like that's what we use. That was implied before. But now, muscle ups is a part of our program, but I'm not telling anyone that they need it to be healthy and fit or to achieve their goals.
No, it's just like that's the most advanced version of that pulling movement. But before there's a whole host of other things you can do for that movement pattern. I think that's a great way to look at it, isn't it? Because I think a lot of CrossFit gyms now do get caught in that idea of having almost like advanced members who can do all of the muscle ups and things like that. And then new people are coming in and seeing kipping pull-ups and kipping handstand push-ups and thinking that's what they have to aspire to get. And then are fast tracking themselves there before they actually have the base level of strength to achieve those, like under fatigue, especially within the CrossFit setting.
Yeah, that's it. It's they're fast tracking themselves before they're ready. And that is where the problem inherently lies, is that people just aren't ready for those movements. They're not ready to kip, and they might never be ready to kip. Like they've spent 50 years at a desk, their shoulders way too tight. It's just it's not ever going to be in that position. It's too late, and sometimes that's just a hard reality to accept. But, if you don't make kipping pull-ups like the goal, then you're fine. You can still help people.
Exactly, because it's almost a case of, well, why do they need to be able to do that movement just to be fit and healthy?
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about
Greg Glassman put it on Netflix and everyone wanted to do it.
Well, and Greg's he's come on a bit of a journey himself, hasn't he? Because he's really fought back against that games model. And CrossFit did that really interesting thing where they took all of their social media accounts down, and the whole game setup has changed, and they look to be really trying to push back with their YouTube channel being like, here's a 80-year-old guy doing a squat rather than here's Rich Froning cleaning 300 odd pounds.
I mean, I think we, like people like you and me, we know the intention, but I feel like the execution was very, very poorly done.
Yeah, just like, let's get rid of it all. Let's just massacre it all and then let the fight for themselves.
Yeah.
They're trying to pull themselves back. So it'll be interesting to watch that journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about your own training. So you started CrossFit then before you opened the gym. So you were starting it around, did you say 2011, 2012?
Yeah, January 2011 was my first session.
Right, yeah. So nine years sort of post that first session.
Yeah.
And so talk us through a bit about your training, because I know from following the podcast, there's been, times when you've been following different advanced training programs. You guys have had a team go to regionals, and now you're very much on the sort of other side of that. So talk us through a bit of like your journey through, okay, CrossFit classes, okay, I need more. And then the kind of, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously been a long journey. I think that I got into the sport with a pretty good foundation in terms of I was already doing squatting, deadlifting, some pressing, that sort of thing. So I had some connective tissue resilience. I'd already seen benefits from the gym for 2 to 3 years, and I had good mobility. I think the problem is when you're young and the sport doesn't have any established best practices for programming, is you just end up doing the shittest programming and basically just pushing it as far as you can until you get injured. And that's basically what I did. Is I just did as much as I possibly could, because this is when I was 19, 20. So you couldn't stop me. I was looking at every program. I was trying to combine them all. I was doing 3 to 4 hours a day minimum training, 7 days a week, and just ignoring what everyone told me, trying all sorts of weird diets, trying paleo, trying keto, trying everything that there was at the time. And, you know, I look at the kids now that get into it when I started, and they're at just such a huge advantage because they're starting on some of the most advanced individualized programs. You know, they've got their macros calculated. They probably do food tolerance tests. They might be doing hormone tests and blood work. And, you know, this is some of the advanced methods that are out there now. And they're basically being treated like professional athletes. Whereas we wanted to be professional athletes, but we were training like absolute amateurs that had no idea what they were doing. And I think that, that just really stalled a lot of my potential and a lot of my progress early on. And so the first 3 to 4 years is just a lot of chaos in the training, not a lot of progression, not a lot of progressive overload, not a lot of accessory work. And then really, I think around probably when we opened the gyms, or maybe just before, when I started getting some coaching off OPEX and started getting some coaching off Training Think Tank as well, is when I started getting exposed to some they were kind of like old school, but more established strength and conditioning principles. So tempo training, overload principles, interval work, you know, alactic work. So just energy system training, that sort of stuff. And that was a really good learning process for me, just as a coach, as someone who was programming for the gym at the time, or for my own gym, someone who had some individual clients that I was working with as well. And for my own training was just a lot more structure to just the whole training volume and the progression in general. And it was kind of good timing because I was really starting to suffer from some knee injuries at the time. And I was everyone's got one joint that started to really give out in their CrossFit career. Most people's shoulders or elbows started to give out. Mine was the knees. So my knees started to go to shit. So it was nice to be able to learn kind of this more balanced, slower, more progressive approach to training, in which I was able to rehab my knees at the same time as still getting stronger. Whereas I think if 2 or 3 years before that, I just had this knee pain, I wouldn't have known how to keep getting strong and still rehab my knees at the same time. So that was a really cool learning process. I learned a lot about like unilateral work as well, split squats and lunges and hamstring curls and, you know, all kinds of Cossack variations and just crazy sort of stuff like that. But I think really going into that rabbit hole then led me to realize how boring and lonely and just almost, I wouldn't say useless, but just unnecessary a lot of those movements are and programming is for just most people and their goals. So went super deep into that stuff and then came out the other side and sort of realized, okay, this at this point, I'm sort of wrapping up my CrossFit career around 2016, 17, I think was our last regionals. And I'd done 4 regionals at that point. And I think I was just a little bit burnt out of the whole thing. We missed a qualifying spot by 1 spot in the team, which was, it felt heartbreaking at the time. But in hindsight, I'm glad we didn't go to the games because we definitely couldn't have afforded it. And we would have been begging for the cash over there. But I think I think I was just sort of done anyway. I think if I qualified for the games, I wouldn't have been that enthusiastic to go and actually compete. Right. Whereas if I qualified the first year or the second year that we'd competed, I would have been much more enthusiastic. By this point, I think I'd really grown out of CrossFit. And I think my coach at the time, if you asked him, he would tell you as well. You know, I wasn't logging on my workouts. I was writing comments like, oh, I just don't feel like doing my weaknesses again today. If you do strict handstand push-ups, you know, 4 days a week, all kinds of weird progressions for 3 years straight, and you go up by 2, maybe 3 reps in your max set, you know, it's a daunting, long, frustrating process. And I think I just burnt myself out of that. And the businesses were starting to really grow. And at that point, I think I made a decision to shift my focus. But it was cool because I did get to accumulate so much knowledge through my own training, taking all those principles, putting individual clients through it, putting groups through it. And so I learned definitely a lot in the process. And coming out the other side now, I think I have a really good understanding of what is necessary and what is unnecessary in the context of whoever is asking for programming, whether it's a group or whether it's an individual.
Yeah, because that's the first thing that matters, isn't it? Is the goals of the people that are in front of you, and the goals that you have as an individual. Because as you said, your goals now have shifted between training for the games, essentially, is what you were doing with being in the regionals team and just trying to be as good at CrossFit as you can. And now you've come out the other side of that and been like, okay, well, what do I want out of health and fitness now?
Yeah, absolutely. And you learn a lot about yourself, I think, through a sport. And at that point, I'd played a lot of sport growing up, but I'd never taken one sport to an extremely high level and tried to be the best possible in that sport. And trying to mentally get myself up for that and that level of intensity on a weekly basis. Well, I think it was invaluable. You learn so much about yourself. You learn about, how, like, where your mind goes, when it's the 20th hour in a training week, you've put in 19 hours before this, your hands are torn, you've just done 100 toes bar. Now you have 14 legless rope climbs to get through. And like, it's ice cold. You don't want to train. Your knees hurt. Like, you don't even have that much money for food. You sleep at the gym and like, you're still trying to make it to the games. You learn a lot about yourself. It's miserable, but it's character building. It really is.
Yeah, when you actually get into the nitty gritty of training 2 to 3 hours a day, like 5 days a week, it does really start to take its toll on your body and your mind. I think, as you said, people probably can only do it for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, at least the way we were doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your, was that a harsh realization for you when you were like, I'm actually done with this kind of training now? Did you go through a period where you were like, what do I even want to do with health and fitness? Or was it kind of an easy transition for you to be like, I just want to be healthy and that training looks like this?
Yeah, it definitely happened gradually. So I don't think there was like a harsh moment where I was like, fuck, you're done. I think even though, like I said, we didn't qualify for regionals we didn't qualify for the games or one spot out. Even before that, I was becoming a little disillusioned with the whole process of training weaknesses all the time and doing 2-a-day sessions and all that. So I'm kind of looking, what's next for me. And I did really spend a lot of time in that kind of limbo state of not wanting to completely give up CrossFit because, it had been just what I'd known for the last 5 or 6 years of training. And it got me to such a, it really just kind of focused me in my training. Before that, I was just kind of, when most people start at the gym, they do a little bodybuilding, they do a little bit of sport, but they don't really have a ton of direction in their training. They feel a bit lost. And CrossFit just felt awesome because you could wake up every day and knew exactly what you were trying to shoot for. It's like that laser focus. There's just something. So anyone that's done it for any period of time just knows that it's such a satisfying feeling, just having that laser focus on one goal. And I think I was really lost for a while of not knowing what to do. Like, I did a handstand program for a bit, and then when I got bored of that, I started doing I think it was the functional bodybuilding training. I think some of the early functional bodybuilding training, and that kind of got a bit boring. And then I think I was trying to set like a 2K row PR on the rower for a while. So I was doing some rowing training and I was like, this is even worse than CrossFit rowing training. So I stopped that pretty quickly. And I was just bouncing around different things. And I ended up letting my coach go. I just told him like, hey, I'm wasting your time because I'm telling you what I think I want to do and you're making a program for it. And I do 2-3 days of it. And I realized I don't want to do this. And so I changed it. And that's like a frustrating process for him. So we just kind of shook hands and agreed. And we're like, hey, you need to go figure out what you want to do. And I think it was just, I never really took time off training, but I definitely took time off intensity. So I just was happy to go to the gym, go through the motions, do some, I think for a while I was chasing some like kind of big deadlifting numbers and big squat numbers and that sort of thing. And that actually, I was enjoying that process. So I did decide, okay, if I got really strong, what would be some really cool numbers to hit? I think anyone listening to the podcast knew I did the 8-week program for, or maybe it was 12 weeks to bench 140. That was really cool. I think that whole process was really enjoyable. So learning how to get really strong and, putting on some more weight, that was actually quite fun. And so that kind of drove a lot of my training for probably, I want to say like a good 12 months.
Right.
And then in the last 12 months, it's really just been because the businesses have got so busy. The focus really did change to like, okay, what is the bare minimum that I will accept for training? Because I do need it for just mental stimulation and just a break from work. But also just honestly, just to maintain everything. Like no one wants to lose progress. There were some things I was happy to lose progress on, like, peak fitness. I was happy to regress a bit on that, but I didn't want to lose too much muscle mass. I didn't want to lose too much strength in the main lifts. And then as well, I did have a back injury that I've kind of been just trying to heal as well. So I wanted to keep making progress with the back, the levels of pain with the back as well.
Sure. Yeah, as you said, it becomes an interesting journey for a lot of people who come out of the other side of, or who have been doing CrossFit for a long time. Because as you
Right.
said, you go through that period of like doing classes, training all the time, not really getting anywhere, and then wondering why, even with like class programming, programming from a coach, as you said, and doing twice a day, you're doing all of this effort for maybe very marginal gains, because with concurrent training, you only get so far, right? You're trying to get fitter, you're trying to get stronger, trying to improve your gymnastics. And then for you to come out the other side of that and then actually think, well, what do I want to achieve out of training? I think a lot of people need to sit and reflect on that for a while. And as you said, you enjoyed getting stronger, because for a lot of people who've done CrossFit for a long time, they've probably never actually done just strength training for a good amount of time to see how far they can take it. And you do see people transitioning, I guess, to like weightlifting and strength and stuff. So I think
Right.
it's interesting for listeners to hear your journey through that, and then how you said now it's kind of my businesses have taken priority because they have to.
Right.
So now it's a case of what's my bare minimum that I enjoy and need to be fit and healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And really it came down to my first love, which was kind of like bodybuilding training. I really enjoyed that. And I think that one of the things that I think a lot of people transition through is CrossFit training teaches a lot of people how to train hard. I think before that point, most people could probably say hand on their heart, they haven't trained this hard before, unless they were maybe like came from the army, or they did like extreme endurance sports, or maybe they played like a really high level of college sports in America. But most people before that point, their gym routines in terms of the intensity didn't even come close to what you would experience in a CrossFit gym. And I think that there was an unlearning process for me in terms of needing intensity. I think theoretically I knew from, just the people we'd interviewed and spoken to and a lot of the research that I read that you don't need intensity to make progress. But I think actually letting go of it myself, of feeling like, you don't have to smash yourself every day in the gym. You don't have to take sets to failure every day in the gym to make progress. I think learning to let go of that was quite a difficult process. I was used to feeling like I had trained really fucking hard, and there was like a sense of accomplishment from that. And then when I would go into these sessions, this bodybuilding training, this bare minimum, so to speak, that I was trying to maintain. It was hard. Like there are moments where it's hard. The 10th or the 8th rep of a set of 12. It starts to get hard, gets a bit spicy, but then it ends, and then you rest, and then you do it again. And so like you can feel the fatigue through your body, but at no point did I ever have to collapse onto the floor and lie down. At no point did I have to like drop into a squat and question my life and chalk my hands and stand in front of a fan. Like, you didn't have to do any of that crazy shit. And so part of you is like, dude, you didn't train hard at all today. Like, what's wrong with you? You're a pussy, like this sort of stuff. And so it's battling that self-talk that became quite difficult. And I think what got me over it was I just did that for a very long time. I just committed to not training crazy hard. And what I started to realize is, wow, you're still making progress. It's not amazing progress, but you're still progressing. You're still maintaining your physique and your body composition. And you're not walking around smashed and injured and tired all the time. It's not like you're always reaching for more bread or like chocolate or milk. It's like, oh, I can actually control like my levels of hunger. So I think that, that 8 to 12 months was just like a really, really nice learning process of me to just kind of be okay with not smashing myself in the gym to make progress.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's what, as you said, that's what you get drilled into, isn't it? The whole intensity is the biggest measure of your results, and you get used to just feeling absolutely crushed after each workout. But as you said there, you're like, oh, actually, I realized that I was walking around not beat up and tired all the time, and you had more energy and mental acuity for other things. So that must have been a nice turning point for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think I look at it now and I see the people that need the gym to be that for them. And it just makes me think they are lacking things outside of the gym for them to put that sort of energy into or distribute that energy.
Right.
If they feel like the gym needs to be that point in their day where they absolutely end themselves, all I'm thinking to myself now, and what I've observed in our clients is, what are you lacking outside of the gym that you feel like the gym is almost like a medication for you? And so we try and have those conversations with clients to kind of unpack, where they're maybe not fulfilled in other areas of their life. And quite often they're not putting time into friendships. They're not putting time into their relationships, or their relationship, I should say. They're not putting time into like their career, or they're just like not pumped about what they're doing for work. And so I guess the gym does become, for a lot of these people, like their only outlet. And I'm not saying that's an easy fix. Obviously these things are tough, but I think bringing some awareness for these people around that sort of thing, because, you know, you've probably seen clients at the gym and maybe even had clients yourself that you've coached where the gym becomes everything. They rely on it to become, you know, their friendship circle, their hard workout, their kind of addiction, for the feeling of intensity of feeling alive. And the gym can't live up to that, you know, for the rest of their life. Eventually, at some point, you know, there's going to hit a wall in some aspect of the gym. You're going to get an injury, and then all of a sudden you can't train as hard, you know, or you're going to go on holidays and you're going to go away from the gym, or that friendship circle that you love, or that coach, they move on, they do something else, and it's kind of like people's world fall apart. And I just try and encourage people these days. If I see them heading down that route of just helping them realize that, you know, the gym is supposed to be there to enhance your life. It's an hour a day, maybe 2 for some people, but it should not become your life.
I think that's a great point. As you said, you see people whose world literally collapses when they get an injury and they're not sure how to get around it because they can't train certain muscle groups or train certain intensity. And as you said, like CrossFit gyms in particular can be very much that entire world for people because of the social side of things, which is good in a way because it does provide a social connection for people. But as you said, people need to be fulfilled in their career and their relationships outside of that as well to have a really like wholesome life.
I think so. Yeah.
So what do you think is next for you personally, training wise? Because you said you were experimenting with that strength program for a good while, but now you're rehabbing your back. Like and now you've kind of got to a bare minimum with building the gyms. Is that kind of you for a good while, or do you think that you'll pick up some other kind of skills as you go forward?
Yeah, I'm actually in a pretty pivotal sort of moment, I think, in my training. I haven't used the gym much to I haven't used the gym for like a gym specific goal for a while. I played basketball last season, picked that back up again, and started playing some tennis again. So I was able to put a lot of that sort of creative physical energy into some old sports, which is really fun, and I will continue to play them. I am doing some rehab for my knees after speaking to some physical therapists. It was not a good decision to go from no plyometric work to hours and hours of plyometric work. So I did suffer from that a little bit. Also, with all my newfound power, I was trying to dunk it all the time. And was successful probably 1 in 10 times, but also, you know, there was some mistimed ones where I kind of landed a bit funny and tweaked my knee. So I was doing some silly stuff during the season that I'm now just kind of paying for a little bit. So I've pressed pause on the sport while I'm just doing some rehab work now. But we did recently just get connected with, it's actually going to be a great podcast. It'll be out soon. Paul McElroy. He's the founder of the Amazing 12 program.
Okay.
He's built this this coaching system. He's an Irish bloke, and it's a really great system. And we want to get some of our coaches certified. And I've been thinking about doing this for a while, but getting my head coaches certified and then getting coached from, or getting programming off one of my coaches. I think for some of the young guys on the team, it would be an exciting project for them to be able to, you know, provide accountability for me, to be able to coach me and provide a program for me. And then sort of in exchange, I would be able to mentor them more on the business side of things. And I think it would just be a nice dynamic for one of the head coaches to be able to program for me and see improvements for myself.
Yeah, cool. I like that. I think it's great when people actually return to doing sports that they enjoyed when they were growing up, because as you said, as you reach adulthood and you find CrossFit, it kind of just becomes like work and CrossFit and that's it. And actually, like, I did the same thing. I returned to I didn't return to rugby because I just think rugby now at this age is just going to be a complete and utter battering. But return to cricket, as boring as it is for a lot of people, but like, you know, just doing it. Yeah, any kind of sport that's social, I think, is a good thing for people to get into. But as you said, going from doing no plyometrics to trying to dunk a basketball all the time will definitely take its toll.
I think that's a good transition for a lot of people. What you just mentioned is going back to sport, because now you have the gym community, you have your sport community, and they're separate. And then you also have the other aspects of your life. So I do think if some people are a bit lost as to what to do next, social sport is a great option.
Yeah. And actually, if we look back to, we talked a bit about Greg Glassman, you know, he talked about like learning and playing new sports, didn't he? It's actually what people forget about utilizing their fitness outside of the gym, because CrossFit becomes their sport.
Yeah, absolutely. The gym, is somehow a sport these days, and it really shouldn't be. And
Hmm.
it only takes playing a bit of basketball, playing a bit of tennis, kicking a ball around or whatever to realize, oh wow, this is really fun. This is like way more fun than the gym. Yeah, I
Yeah.
should probably do a bit more of this. So it is a really nice way to get in like a lot of incidental exercise.
Yeah, and hey, it's a journey through it. As you know, you and I have both been doing this for a long time now, so it's
Right.
a journey through it that people will probably find. It's interesting how you said you're now going to jump on board with someone who you've had on the podcast, and I actually wanted to ask about that because you guys have interviewed, you know, hundreds of people on the podcast of different walks of fitness. And so
Right.
did you find that influenced your own opinion of it? Because obviously you said that you went through OPEX and Training Think Tank and you did your own research, but then you've also got people on the other side of the mic who are like, they're going to be big advocates for their own views or their own thoughts. So
Right.
did that influence you quite a bit, or did you have to just dig deep and think, right, well, what are the principles behind the methods that they've found themselves attached to?
So you mean for programming for myself, or just my thoughts on programming and exercise in general?
I guess a bit of both, because you'll have a lot of people, I guess, won't you, that be like, this is the way that this should be done. And then they might
Right.
conflict with each other. It's similar to nutrition, isn't it? Like when some people are going keto, some people are
Right.
paleo, as you said, there's principles underneath those methods.
Yeah.
So did you
Yeah,
find that was
absolutely.
quite difficult to search through as you were interviewing so many different people?
Yeah, I think the podcast is like just the time we've been doing it. It's a natural filtering process as well. So you might have 5 or 6 well-respected guys that consistently say, 80% the same thing. And
Mm,
then you really use that information and those principles, like you mentioned, to filter anyone else that's going to come through the podcast. Now, we always try and keep an open mind. We try and keep the mic open to people that have new ideas, but then there are definitely extremes and ridiculous shit out there that we're just not going to get on the podcast, because I just know for a fact that what they're saying is just bullshit. Like
yeah.
they're selling bullshit. So we end up getting quite a few people on the podcast that, if you listen, they say 80-90% the same sort of thing,
Mm,
which, could be a little bit of a confirmation bias. We may just start saying, oh, we only like the evidence-based style guys, so we only get the evidence-based guys on. And then
mm,
we don't get enough conflicting ideas about that. But the evidence-based guys get way better results than 95% of the industry because they use established science. So at the same time, I'm also not willing to just get on contrast for the sake of contrast if I know it's bullshit. So I think that's just a process that we just learn over time, that like, hey, yeah, there's definitely some people out there with some good ideas. Some ideas are best left not said on a podcast,
mm,
and just kind of dabbled in those little kind of echo chambers that they build. But then there's like, I'd say probably a good idea for a lot of people to think about is like Julian Pinot, the Strong Fit. So he does read a lot of research, but he's also got some strange ideas about training that is experimenting on a group of people. And so, I'm willing to get someone like that on to kind of explore these different ideas, because I think they have validity. Now,
mm,
I think for people to kind of understand how we kind of filter for the guests now is, if they are coming on and they are going to talk strength and conditioning, they've got ideas about training. Generally, what we like to see is, firstly, this person works with and has worked with clients in the past. So they are a coach of some form. So they understand that the coaching element that goes into programming.
mm,
They do involve themselves in some research. So they cite research, or they use science in some form or another. And they're obviously they're practice advocates of it themselves. They do the actual methodology. And recently what we found is that, especially for the nutrition guys, if they're not doing the coaching side of things, it's a very difficult conversation for us, because you only have to be a coach for a few years to realize, like, you might have the best method, you might have the best science-backed principles or macro breakdown or whatever it is, but you coach 10 people, it works for one, right? It may look good on paper, but yeah, you coach 10 people, it works for one. Why didn't it work for the other 9? Well, it could be a mix of things. It could be this actually isn't the best thing for them, or it could be there's no adherence. So like, how do you get people to adhere to those things? So like, we
mm,
had people listen to, we had Simon Hill on the podcast, who's a kind of like a plant-based nutrition advocate expert, but he doesn't coach anyone.
mm,
So he doesn't understand, like, he has really good information. And I think that a lot of the stuff that he has, which is grounded in some pretty good science, has some like really good valid points. But then how are we getting from that to getting people to apply those principles? Well, that's coaching. There's so much that goes into that. There's so much human psychology, there's habit building, there's all this stuff. And because he's disconnected from that, he's going to really struggle. He just really struggles to understand what it's like to be the gen population to try and adopt these principles. So you can yell from the stands, like, the science says don't eat meat, or like cut down on your dairy, or whatever it is. But people actually doing that is a whole different ballgame. So someone's eaten meat for 35 years, 40 years. They made dairy a regular part of their diet. Getting them to change that is fucking difficult. It's very, very difficult. Right? It's like saying to someone like, hey, don't wear shoes anymore. Like try sandals or whatever. Like they got to throw out all their shoes. They got to buy sandals. They got to get used to wearing sandals every day. They got to find a new outfit to go with the sandals. It's difficult. Like there's a lot of things that have to change. You got to be resistant to change, and most people aren't going to do it. So that is really important to us now. The people we get on, that they have had coaching experience, or they are currently coaches as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because then you've got both sides of the coin. As you said, research that stands alone is just interesting research, because it'll depend on how that research is done, who it's with, how it was controlled, the population size, the population type. And as you said, you've got that guy who's done great research in that area, but you apply that to a gen population, and you're going to get a mix of results for a mix of different reasons. And then you'll also have conflicting science. A lot of science these days just seems to be PhDs arguing with each other.
Right. It's getting ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous. Yeah.
As you said, it's seeking the 80 to 90% of the things they're saying that coincide with each other, which are usually the underlying principles of the things they're talking about, rather than the prescriptive methods of themselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are talking about the methods and trying to coach people do feel a little bit self-conscious, and they tune into these discussions. A lot of coaches, PTs, they tune into the discussions of these really scientific minds, these really bright minds, but they can't keep up. And so they feel like, oh, well, if I'm not fully up to date on all the best science, then I'm not worthy to coach people or to help people. It's just not true. You just need some very basic understanding of food and training to be able to help people. Now it becomes down to how well can you communicate with them? How well can you get them to change their behaviors? Like that is the real art of helping people. And, PTs and coaches, we're on the front line of this health epidemic. It's up to us to make that change, because, pumping more pharmaceuticals into these people is definitely not going to help. And, you're battling against these food companies that are never going to slow down. Processed foods are, the business of processed foods is insane, right? It's a $1 trillion industry. So that you're combating that as well. And by the time they reach the doctors, type 2 diabetic, high blood pressure, cardiovascular risk, potential colon cancer or whatever, it's too late. It's too late. So we're on the front line. And so it's up to us to get the knowledge that we need, be confident, and then really work on our coaching. And that's at least the point I'm at now, where I feel like we can help people the most.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, because I think, and that's a great thing for other coaches who might be listening to this to take on board, is a kind of, once you know enough of the principles, it's like enough to help people. You now need to focus on getting better at helping people, which comes down to coaching practices, rather than like getting an MSc or a PhD, because it's like, unless you want to go into reading and writing research as your job, that's a very different thing to having a PhD on the wall is cool. And, like you've got people like Eric Helms who obviously do very well at both. But for a lot of coaches, they probably don't need to worry about how much they know versus other coaches, and actually how much they know about helping the people that come in front of them.
Yeah. Well, we interviewed John Berardi, who people might know, one of the co-founders of Precision Nutrition. And that was one thing he said. He was like, hey, this is hard for me to say, but a lot of the stuff that I researched, my PhD, my degree in psychology and all this stuff, he's like, it just wasn't that necessary to help people. It's like, it just isn't, it's like, I've done all the research, I've read all the books, I've done 12 years at university, and I'm telling you, I didn't need to do it to help people. So if you can just learn from that wisdom and realize, there is a point where doing more research isn't going to help your clients, then I think you'd be better off less time kind of focusing on that, more time focusing on, the coaching aspect.
Yeah, definitely. So you talked a bit at the beginning about, bringing the ownership of your gyms down to 2. So what do you feel is next for you guys, and what are your goals in the next 12 months?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, it's tough because right now, if people know, Raf's got a kid on the way, so
Okay.
That has definitely changed Raf. I can tell already, for the better. He's a lot more focused. Things are in proper perspective now. There's no wasted time. There's not a wasted minute. He's very much on top of things. For Raf and I, obviously, we have this big announcement that is coming up. We're launching something new, so we're very focused on that. That's going to probably dictate the next 5 to 10 years of what we'll be doing in business. It's still related to the fitness industry, but then for us as well, our mission is really to help kind of create clarity, to bring more truth to the fitness industry. It's a very new industry. There's a lot of bullshit out there. And then people like you and me, we see this stuff and it's very frustrating. It's like, man, the general population, our moms, our dads, our cousins, our friends, they're seeing this shit and they're thinking, oh, if I just go keto, I'm going to cure cancer. Or if I, stop eating meat, we're going to like fix global warming. Like it's just a lot of confusing stuff out there. So for us, the podcast is a really amazing platform that we've developed over the years to help kind of fulfill that mission of bringing that clarity and more truth to the health and fitness space. And so we just want to continue to grow that. So right now we're kind of building our team at the moment. So we've hired 2 new people at the start of this year to kind of help bring out more content and kind of spread the message a bit more, which we're very excited about. So podcast is cool because not too much has to change for our day-to-day. We still, at the end of the day, end up sitting across from each other on the microphones, talking about the stuff we love to talk about, getting obviously the opportunity to interview people. But this new project that we're going to announce will kind of change a little bit of our day-to-day running of what we do for the gyms. So we'll obviously be able to talk more about it when it's announced.
Sure.
Maybe, I'm not sure when this gets aired, but we will be announcing at the end of this month, which we're very excited about. But yeah, that will kind of change our goals for the next 5 to 10 years.
Cool. Well, I look forward to it.
The mission stays the same.
The mission statement stays the same. It's just the avenue is a little bit different. That's cool. Yeah. I look forward to hearing it. So obviously you've mentioned the Mind Muscle Project. You've mentioned Creature Fitness a couple of times. Is there anywhere else that people can go to learn a bit more about you or follow your journey?
Yeah, just my personal Instagram. We got a bit more of a plan and going to put out a bit more content on that just so I can share kind of openly my opinions a bit more on just different aspects of things, and all with the same mission of just trying to help people a bit more with bringing some clarity to health and fitness myths and bring out some more truth. So yeah, that's just Lachy Rowston on Instagram, and yeah, people can follow me there.
Great. Well, I'll link up those things in the description of the podcast. And so thank you again for taking the time to be on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.